Have you checked your calendar lately? Oh, I bet you have. That's right. Today is a day that ends in Y. So you know what that means? Game Pass bad. We're doing this again. We're doing this again. I don't know why every couple of months we have to retread this exact same cycle over and over again, where people try to find any specific scapegoat that happens in the gaming industry, and the first thing they blame it on is my Game Pass, as if that is the catalyst of everything happening bad in the gaming industry right now. Let's not the fact that there's no sense of ownership, game prices have increased, the actual ballooning cost of game development has increased, the fact that consumers are getting less over time from every single version of game they buy, or not to mention the fact that there are countless video games that are in fact free to play, but also provide customers and consumers with limitless time of gameplay and tons of microtransactions to spend money on. But all of that we're going to ignore, but Game Pass, that's the problem. It happens over and over again. And apparently now Game Pass is being levied onto the cross because of the layoffs that happened at Microsoft, where they fired 9,000 employees. But again, no one has been able to actually understand what happened. And it's the fact that Microsoft is planning on betting, or is going to be spending, $80+ billion to increase AI in their entire infrastructure. $10 billion more than the ABK deal, baby, in less than a couple of years. $150 billion burned to a crisp. Let's go. That's right. So they literally went ahead and fired all of those people, as reported by the Seattle Times, because of the fact of AI being levied. And they're going to be firing even more. Now, look, this is not my Alex wears his Xbox vest to defend Xbox. No. That's not what this is about at all, because I have taken Microsoft to task many a time, and I did so previously, just like we talked about with their layoffs before. What this is right now is how developers and publishers are going through and shaming people for not giving more money to them simply because there is a cheaper alternative that is not a requirement to buy or play video games. Yes, I'm serious. This is the only hobby that I have seen directly where people who want to spend less money on the hobby are shamed into doing so. Oh, you gotta support the devs. You gotta give them all your money. Buy your games day one, upfront, full price, baby. That's the only way. Yet at the same time, you own a license for that game. I'm sorry, you don't even own that. You rent a license for that game. You don't even get to keep the game in your library. They can revoke it from you at any specific time. That $80 to $90, by the way, games used to cost $60. Hell, they used to cost $50 back in my day, showing my age on that. And then at the same time, they're increasing the cost of actual hardware and everything else. But you know what? The real problem? Game Pass. But before I keep going on my rant though, let's see what the actual article from WCCF Tech said, and we'll go from there. Following Microsoft's latest rounds of layoffs, which saw over 9,000 people lose their jobs, including many at various Xbox-owned gaming studios, former Arcane founder Rafael Colantonio took to X to explain that, in his opinion, Game Pass is one of the main culprits, not to mention potentially damaging to the industry as a whole. Man, that is a really hot take to have. I'm sure that someone who is in game development and has, done things with Arcane Studios and has also made their own studio, which has also put their game onto Game Pass back in 2017, would have a lot of insight. Let's see what Rafael in fact has to say. Why is no one talking about the elephant in the room? Cough, cough, Game Pass. And into another response to another user, Rafael in fact said this: I think Game Pass is an unsustainable model that has been increasingly damaging to the industry for a decade, subsidized by Microsoft's quote-unquote infinite money. But at some point, reality has to hit. I don't think Game Pass can coexist with other models. They'll either kill everyone else or give up. Here's the problem with all of this, and I want to be very upfront and direct about this, Rafael, especially if you watch this video, or anyone else that sees this. The person who goes around and has to work their regular job, come back home from a long shift of work to finally go through and have some entertainment for a couple of hours at the end of their night, they don't give a fuck about the industry. They do not care if Game Pass is sustainable or not. They do not care about your game budgets. They do not care whether or not you're trying to make art. All they care about is whether or not the game is good and worth their time and or money. You see, you talk about the infinite money from Microsoft, yet we are completely ignoring everything else that happens in the gaming industry. The infinite money that we've seen from game publishers and developers dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into projects with no amount of return being invested. Battlefield 6 reportedly having a $400 million budget is absolutely astronomically absurd. Who knows how much GTA 6 had in its budget? And we also know that that thing needs to sell quite a few copies, and the rumors going around of it being $100 are not good either for the consumer at all. On top of that, like I stated before, the fact that people are realizing right now that you do not own the games you buy even day one and at full price. You only own the license to that product. So if you think of it logically from the regular consumer perspective, I'm giving you more money for less game, for less product to be hounded for microtransactions inside of those games, and then I don't even own the game I buy? Yeah, why would I give anyone more money at all? That's the entire reason why I'm actually okay with Game Pass. You see, right now, the only thing that people have is nothing. They don't have any ownership of anything they purchase. Even physical games aren't properly owned, where most of the time you have to have an online connection to verify that you bought the game in the first place. So literally, again, what are you spending your money on? If I don't own the product and I only have a rental license, then why not just rent the game in the first place for far less money? And the really strange thing about all of this is that your own game, Weird West, was also on Game Pass, a niche game that came out a few years ago. Even though you announced it at the Game Awards, the fact that it was on Game Pass provided more people to have access to play that game without having to spend a large amount of money up front. Seeing as how right now, if I pull it up on Steam, it is a $40 video game, even though the sale right now shows it as 85% off for $5.99. My thing is, I prefer to have things from the perspective of the consumer and the customer first, which is why I stated nobody cares about the sustainability of that service. All people care about is, can I get the entertainment for less money? And if you think I'm wrong, well, look at this. It turns out that young Americans are actually spending 25% less on video games today than this time last year, according to a new report. That's right. In 1 year, people are in fact spending 25% less of their money on gaming overall. And that has nothing to do with Game Pass. It has everything to do, however, with how the industry projects itself onto every other consumer. Your budgetary needs, your concerns, the fact that you want to put microtransactions in everything. A game's budget, a game's scope, its size, its development cost is literally not the concern of the regular consumer. And this is the only industry that I've seen that literally goes through and tries to shame a consumer for spending less money, because at the end, the one thing they'll claim is, well, if you guys don't buy it and support the devs, we'll lose our jobs. And it turns out that even if people buy games day one full price at every single opportunity, those devs still get fired. They still get canned. And every single shareholder doesn't matter, because all they want to do is bend you over and use you as a sleeve for themselves. And people fall for it hook, line, and sinker every single time. In fact, Raphael continues on his Twitter thread saying this: what might happen once Microsoft has won? The games will start to suck and your sub will go up. Why? Because the current amazing deal you have is subsidized by Microsoft, bleeding money into it with the hope they'll kill the competition. But once they manage to do it, things will get real. And this is where I completely disagree. Things have already gotten very real in the gaming industry. We've seen everything under the sun with every opportunity that publishers and developers use to try and nickel and dime customers in every single aspect. And I don't know where Raphael is getting this concept from about games will start to suck if Microsoft takes over with Game Pass. Games already suck. If you compare anything from the PS1 to PS2 era to now, the gaming industry is lacking idea, lacking breadth, lacking depth, lacking lacking any sort of fun new concepts, and everyone's doing the exact same thing. Unreal Engine 5 has become ubiquitous across the entire landscape, where every game practically looks the same. Why does everybody always look wet and shiny? It's kind of weird if you ask me. And then we always see the same kind of gameplay mechanics. If I have to see another 5v5 hero shooter with choke points, just basically mimicking TF2, then in reality, I don't want to play it. It's always the same thing over and over. Oh, look, another third-person, over-the-shoulder action-adventure game with stealth elements, AAA cinematics, cutscenes, and QTEs where I don't play the game and I set the controller down for 45 minutes to an hour to watch a cutscene instead. That's not fun. That's not video games. That's not how things are supposed to be. Yet for some reason, Game Pass is not going to be the catalyst that causes that. What causes this behavior and games to suck, again, isn't Game Pass. It's the gaming industry chasing giant dollar signs and then investing far more money into those games and projects that don't turn out to be the way they ought to be because of the fact that the gaming industry is shrinking, as we saw before, with young people spending 25% less in gaming overall. So trying to blame it on Game Pass makes absolutely no sense. And then on top of that, the fact that live service games today still account for the majority of games still being played. That's right, free-to-play games that take up way more money and in fact more time from consumers is exactly why these game companies are in fact losing out. Look at something like Wuthering Waves. You'd be surprised how much a free-to-play mobile game sucks up people's time and even money on a consistent basis. And that game has better gameplay, better mechanics, and better storylines than most AAA games out today. In fact, even Cromwell of Larian Games decided to chime into this thread as well. Take a look. What happens when all that money runs out is the vocal concern in my network, and one of the main economic reasons people I know haven't shifted to this business model. The infinite money thing never made any sense, with Raphael responding saying, I agree, and I'm fed up with all the BS they fed us at the first, like don't worry, it doesn't impact the sales, only to admit years later that it totally does. No shit, it does. Really? Cromwell responding regarding cannibalization of sales. We aren't seeing that. The economics never made sense, but at the same time, I do recognize that for smaller teams with newer, riskier IPs, it's helped de-risk. Much prefer Sony's lifecycle management strategy. With Raphael saying this at the end. Yeah, the only way Game Pass can coexist without hurting everyone is for the back catalog. Now look, I can see it from a developer perspective. Sure, hey, you want to maximize the amount of money you get in every single opportunity. However though, trying to blame Game Pass for the lack of sales truly doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when we have evidence to prove the contrary. Don't believe me? Expedition 33 and Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered. Both games launched on Game Pass. Both games day and date on that service. Both games selling millions upon millions of copies still to this day, having critical success over and over again. To me, it sounds more like this. Game Pass is an option for the consumer, but the real problem with game sales isn't whether or not the game is on the service, it's whether or not your game is even good in the first place. Because if someone likes the game, they're going to buy it. Hence, Expedition 33, basically, in my opinion, being game of the generation. But you know what? I'm not going to be completely one-sided on this. I can see Raphael's and Cromwell's perspective on the entire thing. I can see how, hey, we were promised X amount of sales, we were promised X amount of money, and they didn't deliver on that. Sure, I get it. That can totally happen. At the same time, though, it is a risk that you have to take, and you have to manage the risk as a developer and a studio on your own. But from a consumer perspective, trying to blame a service that is not a requirement, that is literally available for a customer to use and to spend less money, is not that customer's concern on whether or not it is, quote, unsustainable or not in the industry. We are living in a time and space, again, where people do not own anything, and these companies and studios want more money from the customer now more than ever before, and the opposite is happening. People are in fact spending less. But you know, the classic person to always throw gasoline on the fire, Christopher Cockeye Dring had to throw his hat in the ring as well. So costs associated with Game Pass business is fees paid to third parties, marketing, service costs, and by that measure, it's profitable. What they don't count is the lost revenue that Xbox's first-party studios are seeing as a result of the service. I have to imagine if first-party studios receive similar compensation, that profitability might not be correct. To which Richard Brown responds, so Game Pass itself is profitable, but Xbox including studios isn't? Not seen that anywhere, but it wouldn't surprise me. To which Dring responds, I asked for clarification on the Game Pass's profitable claim and was told no, first-party costs are included. Lightheaven responds to Chris Dring saying this, that's factually not true from the FTC leaks. MS allocates Game Pass revenue based on players and hours spent for first-party games. With Chris responding, it's literally what Xbox told me. Now here's the problem with all of this. Number one, I don't trust Christopher Dring. That's the first thing you should absolutely do. Never trust this guy. There has been so many times he's gone around and said, well, I heard from a publisher, from a source, from one guy that PlayStation this or Xbox that. Well, can you name that source? No, I can't name them, but I heard from a guy who 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 heard from a guy that this is bad. So don't really believe anything this guy actually says. For some reason, it's always these really weird hullabaloos going around with him altogether. But you know, absolutely every fanboy is now taking this to an extreme. Oh, Xbox doesn't count their own games and costs into the sustainability of Game Pass. Again, you don't have to use Game Pass. You can simply buy your game. Like, that's still an option for people. I don't know why people for some reason feel like just because Game Pass as a service exists that nobody buys a video game. We saw that happen with Expedition 33. We saw that happen with Oblivion, with every other big game that comes out, and even then with Doom the Dark Ages, which is a great example like I should have used before. Doom the Dark Ages, in my opinion, I'm not having a lot of fun with, and I am not enjoying that game, weirdly enough. And I loved the previous Doom games. I feel like TDA is not as good as what it could be. But the biggest problem with that game and why it's not selling isn't because of it being on Game Pass. It's because that, especially on the PC platform, it requires a ray tracing capable card, completely reducing who can actually buy and play that game. So even then, if you have a high caliber, high profile game that everybody wants to play, it doesn't mean it's going to immediately do well on Game Pass, and it doesn't mean it's going to sell a ton of copies, especially if you start restricting who can purchase that game or not and who can even play that game or not. The problem, again, isn't Game Pass directly. It is simply an option for the consumer on how they want to choose to give this corporation money for a video game. Microsoft is betting that they can keep you longer under their banner by holding on to you with that service at an affordable price to play more games than they do actually raising the price on you of video games to $80, which they already have done. In fact, my guesstimation is this: the price increase to $80 was so that people can see that as Game Pass being more, let's say, valuable to them rather than spending $80 on one video game. What do you mean? For 4 months of Game Pass, I can play all these games instead of just playing one? I'll do that instead. A very deceitful trick that people have used before, especially other companies. So yeah, I can absolutely bet and almost guarantee that Microsoft was again behind raising the prices of their games and consoles, not because of market conditions, but to try and make Game Pass more enticing for its users and keep them sticky to that ecosystem, which again is not a good way of doing things. But when you look at what the market is doing already, it's also incredibly apparent that the market is providing no other option for the consumer or the player, instead of just actually saying, hey, give us more money, and them saying no. So again, trying to sit here and blame everything onto Game Pass literally makes no sense. The elephant in the room isn't Game Pass. The elephant in the room is the insane budgets, the irresponsible management, and the inability for game developers and publishers to take accountability and provide proper development times, proper budgeting, and not try to shoot for the moon at every single game. Focus more on smaller projects to then build up directly. Focus more on the simpler games that can get people enticed by having a good set of foundations and having a better creativity overall. Again, I'm tired of the same games that we see over and over again. Just look back at the PS1, PS2 catalog. You can clearly see the breadth and depth of those games directly from that moment in time that we do not even have close to anywhere near today. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. I don't even know. And it'd be honestly kind of funny to see what in fact happens. My guess is Game Pass is going to get another price increase. And by my guess, it'll hit $24.99 and then $29.99. Hell, if they don't even skip $24.99 first and just go right to the $30 a month. But what bothers me the most about all of this is the fact that even as someone who doesn't even really use Game Pass at all, I can see the actual value of it from a consumer perspective, especially in the space where we no longer have true ownership of the products that we purchase, and the rising cost of games continues to exponentially increase and is placed onto the consumer rather than the publisher and developer themselves. And that is the real elephant in the room problem that nobody seems to want to address. So you know what? Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Do you think Game Pass is unsustainable? Do you use Game Pass itself? Or are you someone that wants to go off and buy games day and date on your own, or even wait for a sale? Love to hear what you guys have to say. If you want to see more of this kind of content though, more PC port reviews, gaming news, Steam Deck videos, fanboy content, and live streams every Saturday night, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, subscribe to the channel. We've just broken 86,000 subs and are on our way to 87,000. And I just want to say thank you guys so very much. I really do mean it. It's honestly insane. If you want Discord access or most during live streams, become a YouTube member. It's as low as $1. If you don't want to spend the buck, don't sweat it. Just come on down Saturday nights, 8:45 p.m. Eastern. Trust me, you have a hell of a time. You don't want to miss it as I get embarrassed with AITTS for about 5 hours. With all that being said though, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you gooners next time. Peace!